In recent years, a silent revolution has taken place. We thought the age of fossil fuels was coming to an end, and we hoped we were heading for a future filled with renewable energy. But in Texas, deep in the heart of the old oil industry, a handful of men have caused a dramatic shift, putting the United States firmly back on the map as an oil and gas producing superpower.
This breakthrough on shale turned out to be the biggest energy innovation so far of the 21st century.
Thanks to the shale revolution, and with President Trump at the helm, the United States is headed straight for total energy independence.
President Trump will fuel America's future and become the first president to achieve American energy independence.
The shale revolution has opened up a huge reservoir of fossil energy.
I'll say this, wherever there's oil fields, there's shales somewhere nearby that have not been drilled, and that's all over the world.
But what exactly does the shale revolution entail?
We shouldn't be exploiting any more fossil fuel gas because it's ruining our planet.
This is Backlight. Welcome to Trumpland.
Can I have everybody's attention?
The whole world is keeping close tabs on the States, where a few men in Texas are turning the energy supply industry on its head.
Can I have everyone's attention? It might be worth saying a few things about what Mitchell did and how it has impacted the world.
Dan Stewart was a team leader with Mitchell Energy, a small gas company that unleashed the shale revolution in the late 1990s. Once a year, the team gets together to celebrate their success at extracting gas from the Barnett Shale rock formation in northern Texas.
Mitchell started the Barnett looking for something to save the company because we knew that our shallow reserves were decreasing, and if we didn't have something to replace it, we were not going to keep building reserves.
Over half the oil that has been produced in the whole world was produced in the United States, mainly in the states of Texas, California.
It looked as if the heyday of the US as an energy-producing superpower had come to an end. In the previous few decades, America had become known chiefly as the biggest consumer of fossil energy.
America is addicted to oil.
The country had become more and more dependent on foreign oil and gas. On several occasions, this led to costly and radical military intervention, the consequences of which are still to be seen.
If we hadn't proven the Barnett when we did, the price of natural gas would have gotten up to probably $20 an MCF and would have destroyed our economy.
The production of oil and gas in the US was dropping fast. George Mitchell was one of the many who needed to rescue their business. He had to find a new way of extracting gas and believed shale could be the way to go.
So what Mitchell started turned into a world-changing supply of energy. And in my opinion, it was a gift from God.
Well, in his opinion, it was a gift from God. Why? Because it extends the period of fossil fuel dominance in our culture. As he says, it was a world-changing supply of energy, a gift from God. But it's not at all clear it's a gift from God, especially if it increases the dependence upon cheap fossil fuels. There is the question of pollution of the groundwater and air in the immediate area, but there's something even more fundamental at work here that needs to be examined. Dan explains it actually. Take a look.
We glutted the gas market first, then we glutted the oil market to the point that we interfered with OPEC's profits. When we interfered with OPEC's profits, they said, well, we gotta shut this down. We were taking away some of their customers. So they decided they had they had to basically go to war with U.S. operators for survival's sake. And so they started pumping out a lot more oil and dropping the price.
The idea was shale production, oil shale or shale oil production is very expensive. U.S. producers will not be able to drill any wells at these prices. Production declines very quickly out of these fields, and therefore all we have to do is wait around a couple years. We can outlast the U.S. producers. They're gonna suffer. Prices then will come back up because U.S. shale production will drop, and it didn't happen.
For the industry, there's a pro and there's a con, okay? The con is, yes, a lot of people lost jobs, and I hate that. I hate that. A lot of companies went bankrupt. I hate that. But our country gained from this because the companies that didn't go out of business figured out cheaper ways to get more reserves in order to combat the lower OPEC price.
Okay, you can't get a more clear explanation than that. We found out cheaper ways to extract more oil and outcompete the Saudis, who decided not to support the price but to let it keep falling. So the world price of carbon has come down, driving in effect other forms of energy generation out of business, including solar and the renewables. Take a look at the way it's perceived as a victory rather than a big wrong turn.
It's gotten cheaper. We're getting more oil out of the wells for less cost. And so that's where we're at. 10 years from now, I don't know. Maybe we'll be able to produce it at $30 a barrel. Everybody in the U.S. It just depends on how much we can recover and how good we get at that recovery. But it's a tremendous thing for the United States of America to have this play. It's changed the whole political structure of the world. What's happening right here.
The addition of U.S. shale has certainly shifted away from an OPEC-dominated world oil market to a much more competitive oil market, and that's been driven by this amazing increase in U.S. production. I think it's now recognized that it's part of the mix. I think it's also recognized that it's not high-cost oil. It's medium-cost oil, and there are other oil supplies that are higher cost around the world. And so it's a recognition that shale is going to be part of the mix. It's not going away.
Now, one of the big questions we have about who would want to come and visit here. Well, from all over the world, from China, Japan, South America, Middle East, all over Europe. You name the country in the last 3 years, they visited in here to see what this is all about. And do they have the potential for it? I'll say this, wherever there's oil fields, there's shales somewhere nearby that have not been drilled. And that's all over the world. So we see a really big future for shale being able to deliver oil and gas. So all the Middle East oil fields are conventional sands and limestones that produce oil. Guess what's underneath those gigantic oil fields in Saudi Arabia? Shales that have never been drilled.
Okay, you get the impression here, you get the idea. There's far more out there underneath those oil fields that have never been tapped with this new technology, shales. Fantastic news. Everyone's going to get in on it. They've all been going down to Texas to look at the technology and learn about it themselves, and I'm sure Texas is willing to sell it, licensing and the like at a price. And America has now emerged to being an exporter of fossil fuels to the Middle East. This is an extraordinary revolution, and exactly in the wrong direction. We're going 90 miles an hour at 180 degrees the wrong way, and we haven't realized that at the end of the street, we're running into a dead end. In fact, we're going off a ski jump at an accelerated rate. Really quite extraordinary. The myopia, complete myopia, of some of the most intelligent individuals in America. People like Daniel Yergin, who was among the first of his class when he graduated in 1968, along with George Bush, from Yale.
That are untapped, that will be decades and decades of potential production into the future.
Now, here's the very interesting slip-up in the logic. Decades and decades of potential production. What he means, obviously, is extraction. Nobody in any of the fossil fuel companies, in any of the fossil fuel nations of the world, have ever produced a single drop of oil. They don't produce it. It was produced about 300 million years ago by biogeochemical processes and, in effect, sequestered beneath the Earth's surface. Not producing a thing, they're releasing it. They're making it available, accessible, refining it, delivering it to those who wish to what? Oxidize it, combust it, get the energy out of it by burning it. And he's celebrating that as a good idea, when we already know we can't live in the world whose atmosphere is the sink into which all of that oxidized carbon is placed. It's staggering.
Shale, gas and oil has introduced even more fossil fuels onto our energy market. This abundance of cheap fossil fuels now threatens to price renewable energy out of the market. Many people wonder how it will affect our efforts towards a sustainable future.
Well, take a guess how it's likely to, in effect, affect the movement to a sustainable future. We have no sustainable future if we're undercut by an abundance of even more cheap fossil fuels, keeping alive the illusion of economies of infinite growth on a finite planet. It can't happen, it won't happen. But the crash is going to be ever more dramatic the longer we choose to ignore the problem. And we've chosen to ignore the problem in a big way. Really quite staggering way, in a sense. I mean, what we need to do is start to get sober about some of this stuff and realize the basic physics underneath it. In other words, what are we looking at here in terms of how the biogeochemical systems of the Earth work, and what can we survive with and without? Let's take a look. I mean, it's really quite staggering.
Shale, gas and oil has introduced even more fossil fuels onto our energy market. This abundance of cheap fossil fuels now threatens to price renewable energy out of the market. Many people wonder how it will affect our efforts towards a sustainable future.
What in the United States, what low-cost gas has done is really pushed coal and taken market share away from coal. Coal used to be more than 50% of electric generation not so long ago. Now it's under 30%, and gas actually has a bigger share. So, I think there's a long-term energy transition happening. I think it's going to unfold over many decades, not over many years. But renewables will become progressively more important. I think natural gas plays a particularly important role as a partner of renewables, because renewables are intermittent. The classic thing is the sun doesn't shine all the time, the wind doesn't blow all the time, and so gas is an important part of the mix.
Shale gas as the ideal partner for renewable energy. That's one way of looking at it, according to the Americans. And as they now have an abundance of gas thanks to the shale revolution, They present themselves as the new energy superpower on the world stage.
You gotta get the intellectual gymnastics that's been achieved there by this brilliant Daniel Yergin. He's calling it a partner with renewables. A partner with renewables. Some you can call it a bridge fuel, right? A bridge, well, it's not a bridge to less dependence on fuel. It's just a shift from one form of carbon, coal, perhaps dirtier, to natural gas, perhaps cleaner. Yes, at the point of burning, it is cleaner, but not at the point of extraction, at the point of leakage, at the point at which methane is being, in effect, spilled into the atmosphere on a scale never previously seen in Earth's history. It's really quite extraordinary to think of it as a partner with renewable energy. But he does. I mean, it's quite, as I say, the intellectual gymnastics on the part of those who are making money off of this bonanza is absolutely staggering. They have convinced themselves that they're, for the first thing, producing fossil fuels when they aren't. Secondly, that the more efficient ones will help us become less dependent on fossil fuels. On the contrary, they build in a greater and greater dependence, as any person who knows about addiction realizes. If you lower the cost of drugs, people can take more of them at the same price.